I've been studying the video game addiction to abuser pipeline, and I find it rather interesting because I used to be with a person who was addicted to video games, and it made him into a very abusive person. Being addicted to anything can turn you into an abuser, and you don't have to have an addiction to be an abuser. Playing video games does not necessarily mean that you are addicted to video games, so before everybody loses their shit, those are all your disclaimers. I apologize if there's a windy sound as I'm talking. The temperature is in like the 80s or 90s, so I'm not gonna just sit here in the sun and burn up while I'm talking. I want to just have the air on, if that's okay. So just like anybody else with an addiction would say, he would say that he liked to indulge sometimes. And anytime I would point out that he was playing video games a little bit excessively, he would say things to me like, well, I would never say anything like that to you about your hobbies. You are just discriminating me because I like to play video games, and there's a stigma about video games, and you're not being inclusive of guys' hobbies. Which I could understand that perspective if he was only playing a little bit, but this man actually had quit his day job to play more video games. He claimed to be a Twitch streamer. He had like 30 or 40 followers on Twitch, so he decided that he was going to be a full-time Twitch streamer. And if you don't know, it takes 50 followers to hit affiliate, and at affiliate, you barely get anything unless you're huge. But he hadn't even hit affiliate yet. And I know what you're thinking, wow, you dumbass bitch, why did you stay with him? There was every other form of abuse involved alongside of this, so it was very hard for me to leave for quite some time. But I made it out, so shut up. Anyway, during this time, anytime I would question him and be like, hey, I support that you want to be a social media creator. Like, I'm working on my social media as well, but I actually have a full-time job and another part-time job on the side, and I'm supporting both of us additionally to pulling savings to pay our bills every month. So it'd be really helpful if you actually like got a real job. And you can still do this on the side, but in the meantime, you need like a source of income to help us pay the fucking bills. And of course he would jump into this manipulative thing that he'd always do, where he would always just go off on me about how I'm not supporting his dreams and I'm not supportive of his goals, and that if I want him to quit doing Twitch full time, that I'm essentially telling him to kill off his dreams, which was just a very manipulative thing that he would say to me every time I would bring it up. So it turned into a big fight. A lot of times a lot of emotional abuse would happen. He would just make me feel like I was the worst person in the world for daring to question his abilities, and he'd always bring up, well, I used to be a professional video game player, and I'm like, dude, you are not a professional video game player right now. You are a dude with 40 followers on Twitch. No one knows who you are, okay? So anyway, that made him really mad. Well, eventually he hit 50 followers and hit affiliate, which he had his friends make some fake accounts, which is pathetic, honestly. So because every time it turned into a big fight and he made me feel like the worst person in the world, and there would be tears and there'd be screaming and there'd be crying and there'd be yelling, anytime I would be like, hey, I really would appreciate if you would just get a day job and you just do this after work. He pretty much trained me just to not ask about it. Like, it got to a point where I was like, whatever, I'll just work these jobs and just take care of us, knowing in the back of my mind eventually we probably wouldn't be together. And I was right. I think what hurt the most was that he would spend hours upon hours. I'm talking like literally 12 or more hours a day playing video games online and talking to people and considering them to be his friends. He had no real life friends. His only friends were people that he met online and that he played video games with online. He would talk about them as if they were real life friends. He would talk about them and call them by their screen name. Well, one time he told me that he told one of them that doing Twitch and streaming video games was his full-time gig, and he was telling me that this person laughed at him and he was so upset about it. I wanted to just like sit there and be like, I'm so glad the dude validated me and made me feel like, yeah, like your dude is just a fucking loser. Again, there was no frontal lobe development. I was very young when I was with this person, early 20s, okay? Please don't judge. I'm not with him anymore. And with an abusive person, of course, they isolate you and make you feel like there's no one else going to be there to rescue you. So that was a part of the manipulation and the abuse cycle, and part of the reason I stayed as long as I did. But I remember it being just the end of the world to him that somebody was like making fun of him for saying that Twitch streaming was his full-time gig, when I remember there was a year where he made $1 from Twitch streaming the entire year. Like, dude, you deserve to be made fun of. I'm sorry. Not that there's anything wrong with social media and content creation, but when you are claiming that's your full-time gig and you're not working any other jobs to like have some income in the meantime, yeah, you're a fucking loser. I'm sorry. And the issue was that his hobby, video games, came before our relationship. It came before my needs. It came before his own needs. I mean, he neglected his physical health too. Like, he looked terrible because he would go so long on these streaming and gaming binges where he wouldn't shower and he wasn't brushing his teeth. He wasn't wearing deodorant. He was disgusting. He quit taking me on dates. He didn't have money to pay for dates because he was busy with his addiction. And the problem wasn't that he had a form of escapism, because let's be honest, I'm sure we all do. It was because this escapism, he used it to avoid responsibility. He wasn't doing any chores around the house. He'd never do dishes. He would never clean up counters. He'd never pick up after himself. I ended up doing most all of the chores. I want to say never, a little loosely, because I'm sure there was a time or two that he did, but not often. And he neglected our relationship, and there were times that he would play video games with women, and that would be very hurtful to me because he was spending more time with these people online that he didn't know than me, his partner. And I think one thing that really was hard about it was that I felt like I couldn't talk to him in person about these things a lot of the time, because when he was playing these games, the mic was on, and a lot of times he was streaming the games, and the mic was on to a Discord group of people. It'd be like 5 or 6 people playing these games with him. And so if I sit there and be like, hey, I really wish we could spend some time together, or hey, could you get off of that and do, the dishes, like, hey, I feel like we haven't talked to each other all day, hey, what do you want for dinner, like any of that, anytime I would just try to like intervene, number one, it was an invasion of privacy. I felt like I couldn't be myself in my own home because I was constantly being recorded and broadcasted. It was a small apartment, and he played games right next to the bed. Also, that played into sleep deprivation, but I would look like the crazy partner, the crazy girl, because I had to like remain calm. I couldn't raise my voice, even though he's got headphones and he's shouting over the headphones so he can hear himself. He's pretty much yelling directly next to me because his setup was next to the bed, and I would just hang out in the bed, watch TV, whatever, do my nails, whatever I wanted to do. And so if I got onto him and the mic was hot, then other people were hearing me talk to him, and I felt like it was an invasion of privacy in my home, in our relationship, and it further silenced me. And some of the things he said to me were pretty textbook for people who are addicted to video games. Like, he'd be so heated over the game, and he'd be so quick to yell, "Not right now, I'm busy." And I'd ask maybe like a timeline, like, hey, like, could we maybe like get off by like 11, or 10:30, or like a decent fucking time. And he'd be like, I don't know when I'm getting off. And I would just come back later and be like, hey, like, do you think you could get off like pretty soon? Like, I really wanted to eat dinner with you. I didn't want to eat dinner alone again. And he'd be like, I don't know, I'm busy right now, I'm in the middle of this. And then he'd play another game. Like, I'd hear it end and I'd get like that little flutter of excitement, like, oh yay, now we're gonna hang out. And then he would just start a new game, and the games lasted like 20 or 30 minutes, and it was just horrific. And I think the addiction, I mean, I have experienced addiction in other aspects of my life. Thankfully, I'm recovered now. But addiction to video games, I believe, comes from a source of escapism, as I mentioned, but also feeling a sense of accomplishment. And it kind of tricks your brain into thinking that you're feeling a sense of accomplishment in real life because you are starting accomplishing things online, but it isn't bringing any real money into the bank, any real success. I support social media careers. I mean, look at me. I have 40,000 followers on here. I've worked very hard to get there, but I didn't do that without like making money elsewhere as well. It was a very hurtful time, and I'm glad that I'm out. But I think people should be aware of guys like this, and they should not date guys with video game addictions. It's okay to play video games if you want, but things done in moderation are better than addiction, obviously. Addiction isn't always substances. It can be video games. It wasn't the gaming that was the red flag. It was his entitlement. It was his neglect. It was his disrespect. It was the yelling at me. It was the taking the anger out of the games on me. It was the fact that he would do it 12 plus hours a day and then barely say hello to me the entire day. We'd go 4 or 5 days without speaking sometimes. It was a big deal.